I mentioned in the previous video how your body, your temple, basically you bring this religious aspect that people use to externalize their power. And the way you internalize it is knowing that we use certain words for specific purposes. We usually say, oh, I do this religiously, meaning you do it all the time with no exceptions. So it's a structure that you have because it benefits you, right? I do it religiously, or it cannot benefit you. So like I made the example about how your body consists of trillions of cells. Your body is the reality you're experiencing, but this cell could be a battery or it can be a jail cell. But perception and perspective is key. So however you're perceiving your reality determines how these cells are going to be utilized in the body, as batteries or as jail cells. Because the only way that you can be in a jail cell is mentally. And from mental slavery, it manifests into physical slavery. So you notice how we talk about we're going into the past, right? When we're moving forward into the future, or supposedly. But do you notice how when we look at things linear is when we get lost? So we were once physical slaves, right? And then now, as time went on and technology came out, and we start to see that we're actually going more and more into the primitive past instead of going into the future, right? We seem to be making advancements because we're making technology the gauge to know how technologically advanced we've become. It's no different than somebody saying, I'm successful and I am a person of status because of the illusion of the amount of money I have or the followers that I may have acquired, right? When you look at luxury, you get the word lux, and that's the measure of light. But there's also a false light. And the more we go into the future, see, we started off as God, right? Let's say that as the starting point, if we want to look at it from a linear timeline. We stopped being God, right, to be more human-like. That's why they say man was created in the image of God. So we were supposed to be experiencing humanity, but not forgetting that we are God in and of itself. Then they made computers made in the image of man. And we stopped being human now to depend more on technology. We merging with AI little by little, right? We can see this in the things that we stopped doing for the computers outside of us to do things for us. We're going to have something called metaverse, which will really merge with AI the same way we merged with our body and became so in tune and associated with this human aspect of ourselves that we forgot that we were God. Okay? So when you look at, for example, you're in your now moment. Do you notice how for you to say, I'm going back into the past, well, I'm going into the future like this, you have to get into that. You get what I'm saying? But these are just potentials. Right now in your present moment is all that exists. I forgot where I was going with all this. Okay, this is where I was going with this. The religious aspect of things is how I started this video. So we start to say now, religiously, you see, this is how your body is the technology in the temple. This is where I was getting at. When we look at how we designed these ancient structures, these megaliths, monoliths, these pyramids, right? It's so hard to imagine that anything other than the technology we currently have now as far as like building things, it's hard for us to fathom anything other than that building these pyramids. But they tell you slaves built it. They told you that they rolled these stones in sleds, but the type of stone that these pyramids were built in were not found within 500 miles of that building site, which is a fucking crazy distance for you to have to move these sleds. You get what I'm saying? But the whole thing is that we can't fathom this because we're only thinking of what we have right now as far as technology goes. But we're only looking at it from what we see outside of ourselves and not really looking at things from what we have within us. So as an example, everything is just programming and conditioning you to think a certain way. For example, you got all these planets that are aspects of what we have within us, right? But we can only see a certain amount of planets, right? With the technology we have. I'm sure there's way more planets out there that is further than Pluto, but we can't get that far with the current technology we have, right? So the only thing that you can get to know that's outside of yourself is just basically based on knowledge, but you'll never have an experience. But you see how they started with this is that they told you they took a rocket and went to the moon, right? So going to the moon was how they made you believe that this is the only way that you can leave planet Earth, right? But even doing so, there's still debates of people going back and forth as to if the planet is round or flat. Because if they've went out of space, I'm sure they could have brought back some type of images to show you if the Earth was flat or round. But instead, all you get is CGI pictures, right? There's a lot of conspiracy theories showing you that these astronauts that they have videos of that supposedly were in space are really underwater, and they're making you think that they're in outer space. They have these, what do you call these? These, they'll be in a no gravity room with these jumpers that basically have them assimilating as if there was no gravity, and they can do these things, but in actuality they're just being held by these mechanisms. I forgot what you call them, the suspenders, and you know they basically have these things where they can assimilate how they just jumping up and down as if there was no gravity, showing you how they're in space and whatnot. So many videos on that online that you can actually go check out. But when you look at this, we're really going more and more into the past. We're getting more away from our, let's say, evolving as a species. And you would not even believe how this is actually even possible. Like when we look at something that's it's part of the quantum realm, like viruses and whatnot. These things are the potential for the upgrades of your body. So how we talk about we got ascension symptoms, spiritual upgrades and whatnot. What is spiritual? Spiritual is the unknown, the unseen. You can't see spirits, right? So when you look at viruses, right? The viruses are part of the quantum realm that you can't even observe that under a light microscope. So these things are the actual upgrades. The thing is, you got a mental program as to what a virus actually is. You get what I'm saying? The same way they make you look at certain plants in your garden. Certain plants, for example, have mind-altering capabilities that will happen if you ingest them into this vessel. But when we look at the plants, for example, the plants have no brain and they have no heart, right? So when you start to look at this, we say, well, we can eat plants because they're not sentient, right? But how do you know you're not the mind and brain of these plants, right? You are the walking virus. You need a host, right, to strive and survive. So you get into something to be able to express yourself. So you get into character, right? Based on the programs, which are all mind viruses. That's what a true mind virus is. It's something that instilled in the mind. You take that as badges. You associate with certain, certain philosophies and whatnot. So what did you do? You got into a topic for you, or into a character for you to express yourself in. It's just like when you're about to make a movie, you get into character, right? You act, and that's why everything here in this reality is about acting. Yo, man, bro, why you acting like that? Yo, stop acting like that, man. Yo, that person is acting all weird and shit. You see what I'm saying? You see how we use that word acting all the time, right? When you look up definitions in the dictionary or on Google, and you will see what does this mean. It says the act of doing this. That means that everything's an act. You're basically acting and not realizing that you're acting, right? So when you become aware of how you're acting, now you start to kind of take control of the wheel to some extent to how you conduct yourself in society. You're more being a conductor in this training process that we're going through, because everything's a mental training. They train you in the gym. You go to a job, they train you. You know what I'm saying? You go to a gym, you train your body in the gym. Everything's training, right? Everything's a train. And then you got trains of thoughts, right? But the train needs a conductor, or are you just one of the little fucking carts in the back being led and steered in a certain direction? That's why people say that guy's on the right track. But if he's on the right track, it's because he sees the vision, because he's on his own lane. He's not in anybody else's lane. And that's why people say, don't cross my lane, don't cross my path. You know what I'm saying? You're in your lane. You can see your path. You got a clear vision of where you're going, right? But when you got a clear vision of where you're going, now you start to see that where humanity is going is really going into the past. Because when you look at how the body operates, as far as how I even started this video, the religion part, your body does things religiously, like heartbeat, metabolism. All these things happen religiously. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do things religiously because you do them without any exceptions. If not, that would cease to exist. If you stop doing something, that process would cease to exist. If your body stopped doing what it does religiously, it would cease to exist, right? Your body doesn't know the difference between a real or a fake experience. It's like an entity that's alive, right? But you kind of control the dragon. If you let emotions get the best of you, then things happen and you might get in trouble, and it was all due to your ego, right? So let's say, for example, if I am overly sexual and overly lustful and it's like extremely out of control, you might go and rape somebody, right? Because you can't control your animalistic urges. This is what animals do. Animals will go and just hump anything that's walking. The cats in my garden they ain't asking the girl for consent to have sex. They're just grabbing the cat, getting on top of her, biting the back, and pushing her down to submission to get busy, right? So this is what humans do when they're disconnected and their animalistic side is not under control. You're no different than the animals that just appear in your reality. They're not really there. They're just appearing, and they're mirror aspects of yourself, right? So when you start to see this, right, you'll start to notice that through certain seasons, your hormones also tend to get a little bit more, you know, a little bit more online, more fired up, right? These are certain energies, particularly in the springtime. And I'm noticing these cats particularly wanted to mate in this particular time because the hormones go up, right? This is why I made the videos on when you eat meat, right? And the things, you know, based on correlations, right? The law of correspondence. You start to see like a blueberry being blue would cater to a blue chakra. Like if you ate mangoes or even a lemon is like a little sunball to me. You eat that, drink that first thing in the morning in your distilled water, and you're taking in liquid sunlight. In your mind, you are basically taking in liquid sunlight. Now here's the crazy part. The lemon seems to be very acidic, but it's actually very alkaline forming for the body. The sun seems to be acidic because it's so hot, but it really isn't hot. The sun really isn't emitting that kind of heat. And in fact, the sun is actually alkaline forming for the body. It may seem inflammatory if the chemistry is not conducive to what you're seeing outside, which is basically a mirror aspect of you, right? So that interaction with the sun may be a little bit unfavorable for you, right? So you are what you eat. When you eat, right? You eat to the seasons. You may eat to the, you know, let's say blood types. There's people who eat a certain way based on certain conditions, right? So when you eat, for example, a lot of fats and it's the summertime, then what is happening here, man? These oils, these man-made oils, these, you know, these nasty oxidized oil come out of your skin, and those are acids, right? Because your skin is a main eliminative organ. It's a big, large organ. So when you're sweating, right, the sun comes in contact with that, and what is happening is that those acids are what's burning your skin, not the sun, the acids that are coming out of the skin. So if you ate grapes, mangoes, blueberries, strawberries, if you ate these kind of foods and then you went and sweat in the summertime, you're going to start to glow gold. You're going to be like a golden bean, because these are the things that come out of the body, right? Which is basically stuff that thrives being in the sunlight. Like if you go to the tropics, you're going to see fruits growing out of these trees. In Alaska, you don't see that. People start to go ice fishing, but you don't see those type of fruits. But if you leave a piece of meat out in the burning heat of sunlight, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to fucking rot. So things that are going within you, right, in the same way will tend to not be conducive to the environment that you're in. This is why people eat to the climates, eat to the seasons. So wintertime seems to be more of a spiritual time, right? Seems to be more of a, time where people do like rituals. You got seasons like Halloween, you got all these other holidays and whatnot. In the summertime, you kind of come out and enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? So you come out in the spring. Summertime, things are in full-blown, mode. You could do this in business, you could do this with magic, whatever it may be. However, you got to be aware that everything that you're enjoying will always have some type of things that you have to monitor, like pests. So you have a garden in the middle of the seasons, there's always going to be Japanese beetles that I gotta like pay attention to, certain things that I gotta pay attention to. I'm kind of being the god of my realm, monitoring the garden, right? So when you take things into your space, like food, information and whatnot, okay, you have to understand that they might have mind-altering effects, like information, and you buy into it, you form belief systems around it because you're disconnected from yourself, then it will start to mold your reality a certain way. This is what you call being in a simulation within a simulation, right? Because you kind of like bought into that reality. For example, if you become a conspiracy theorist, you buy into conspiracies, you're more unlikely to become a doomsday prepper, and you might experience a doomsday apocalypse, while somebody may just experience it from the comfort of their own home. So, when you eat meat, for example, red meat, we're going to go into the law of correspondence. Your root chakra is red. If I eat a walnut and it looks like a brain, I can say it's good for my brain, right? But again, the root chakra is that's a God space, right? It's just the total polar opposite end of what we would go up and down. So we got the God head, but there's also a Godhead down there. It's just two sides of the same coin. You're like the same coin. You're looking at things like this though, right? Right here. This is your dome. You see the world flat because you're looking at it from here. The subconscious is whatever's underneath. But it's two sides of the same coin, right? Now, people say your aura extends a certain distance away. How big can you be? Your body is a certain size, right? Physically, but the Godhead and the rest of the aura, right? You can see how big that is. When I look at the trees and I'm staring at them long enough, I'll see an aura coming out of the trees, and it expands. You know what I'm saying? So whatever is up here tends to be a little bit more invisible to the naked eye. So your root chakra, sexual energy, you can manifest a lot easier with sexual energy, right? So your root chakra is considered your animalistic side to you, right? What do the animals, their purpose in life is to breed and reproduce, right? Reproduce and ensure the survival of their species, right? This is why when you eat certain things, you're feeding certain things. Like when I eat Ferrero chocolates, I always say I'm feeding certain things, right? Now, I made the example in my previous videos where I talked about when you cook it, when you cook the meat and leave it raw and whatnot. Go watch those videos. It'll explain a few things in there. But when you're eating certain things, like meat is not the problem in the body. Meat has the potential to be stagnant in the body, right? Because you're gonna cook it. It's omega-6 driven. It's got inflammatory properties to it. Saturated fats tend to clog your arteries, right? So what's happening here is that if you are a harmonious individual where your chemistry is always very harmonious and balanced, the meats, that's why people can eat whatever they want and they live to 100 years old, no problem. They'll eat these meats, they can thrive. But it's gonna start from here though. If you're an inflammatory person outside of you, where you buy into all the things outside of you because you're so ingrained in your humanity, then you're more than likely to get a human disease. Because what you're doing is you're creating stress. You're holding on to an emotion. You see, the reason I just said meat can have inflammatory properties, anything that's inflammatory, things that don't move tend to rot. They become stagnant. Your lymphatic system being stagnant tends to create disharmonious chemistry in the body. You get diseased. Putrefactive, fermentation and whatnot, right? So, but it starts from you. If you're an inflammatory person outside of you where you hold grudges and whatnot, notice how I say hold grudges? That means something's stagnant, something's not moving, right? But you're doing it with your consent, meaning that now since you ate meat, that's a recipe for disaster. Now, those two combined is more than likely to create a human disease. No different than if you have a motivation, right? You kind of become it in your mind first, and then you put in the action to put into work, right? So you see how we looked at it from that way. But in this aspect, right, you're eating the meats, but you are a certain way first, right? So it would seem like the meat is causing the problem because you're eating meat, and then people say, I ate meat, and now this is the disease that can potentially happen. No, you are a certain way first. And because you're eating the meat, right, that's kind of like putting the action toward a motivation that you already have. So you're manifesting in a low vibrational state. I hope I made sense with that. So do you see how you can manifest in a high vibrational state or a low vibrational state? Doesn't make a difference, right? But the things being attacked here in between, where you lose the connection between all that, is your nervous system, because the lights are out. The nervous system is the electrical system of the body. So if the lights are out, you can't see shit. You can have perfectly working appliances in your house. If they cut the light in your house, I don't care how many good appliances you have, none of them are going to work, right? Or if you cut the breaker in one part of the house, then certain parts of that where appliances are connected in that part of the house aren't going to work, but it'll work in other areas, right? If you cut the main one, that's where your router's connected, and your house is like in a Wi-Fi frequency, then the whole shit may not work because now the frequency is disconnected. So this is how we're disconnected from the field that we can call our life force energy, the spiritual essence. We're connected to an artificial frequency and disconnected from the organic frequency that we're meant to be connected to, because a virus is a frequency. It's a potential. You're implanted the mind virus and told, and you buy into the idea of a disease, right? And because you buy into it, you're in anxiety, fear, and stress. And then what ends up happening is that you're manifesting under a low vibrational state. You manifest a human disease out of that. That's why the viruses could be bacterial or viral infections. The bacterial ones are the ones that are fucked up, but they give you antibiotics for that, when in actuality, if you knew your land, you would fight bacterial infections with the right bacteria that comes from your soil in your garden, which are called herbs and fucking plants, right? But instead, you're doing it with antibiotics, killing everything in your body, good and bad things, leaving yourself vulnerable and open, but also completely distorted from the connection of life force, because there's nothing there, right? So when you have a viral infection, your body's meant to process that. These things have the potential for upgrades, and I believe these are actually the spiritual upgrades. Now, I want you to understand something. I'm not a medical doctor. None of my stuff is backed up by medical science or medical claims. Do your own research, all right? You don't listen to what I'm saying. You shouldn't be listening to what anybody says online. Just listen, take what you need, and poop out the waste. Don't form belief system. Belief systems is like the body not being able to take a shit. You're holding on to a belief system. Be open and malleable. Be like a child. To enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to be childlike, not childish. Children are open-minded, but they're more flexible and malleable. Adults become stiff, rigid, but most importantly, and unfortunately, actually, they become closed-minded. And when you're closed-minded, it's no different than having an open hand. You can't give or receive. If you like this video, like it. We'll talk soon. I'm going to tie in another part to this.